Hello and welcome to Bad Words and Taboo Terms. I am Randall Agert. So I'm just going to hand you over to a video that I've produced as an introduction to the class. I've been teaching this class for a long time now, more than 10 years. And I'm going to start by asking you a question that I've asked since day one, way back when the class began. To start with, I need you to think about your native language, the language that you began acquiring from the time that you were born. I imagine that for most of you, that's probably English, but there is a sizable number of students in the class who come from other backgrounds. So I want you to think about your first language, your native language, whatever that might be, whether it's Chinese, French, Hungarian, Japanese, Borishowski, Wolof, whatever it is, I want you to think about that language, and I want you to start searching through your mental vocabulary of that language for the worst of the worst word of that language, the one that makes you cringe. And I'm going to give you a moment to think about what is that worst word of the language. All right, I trust that all of you have that word in mind now. And now I'm going to ask you a couple questions about that word. The first question is, would you use it? Would you say it to somebody else and mean it? I imagine that for some of you, the answer is a resounding yes, absolutely. As part of my vocabulary, yeah, I'd use it. But I also expect that for a large number of you, perhaps most of you, the answer is no. That's the answer for me. No, there are words of English that I will not use. They offend me too much. So let me ask you another question now. Would you say it? Imagine, just hypothetically, that you were taking a class on the linguistics of taboo words, and that your professor asked you to stand up in front of the class and say that worst of the worst word that you could imagine. Would you do it? Could you do it? Again, I imagine that for many of you, the answer would be yes. But I also imagine that for a fair number of you, the answer is no, you couldn't do it. I'll be honest with you, when I began teaching this class many years ago, I would come to certain words that I'd want to discuss in the class, and I would have to say them, and I would have to force them out of me. They didn't want to come out. For better or worse, it gets easier, and now they seem to flow out of me. So I understand, but now is a good time for me to state something that I'm legally bound to say. In this class, I will not accommodate for language. What that means is that there may be certain words that offend you to the core. They offend who you are as a person. But I'm not going to give you an out on that. I'm not going to excuse you from discussing those words, from paying attention when we cover those words, from reading those passages, from viewing the videotapes or the videos that refer to those words and talk about those words, and may even show people using those words. You're not going to be excused from that. No matter how much they offend you, you still have to consume the material and interact with the material in this class. And I'm not going to let you out with sort of those coy avoidance strategies that a lot of us are prone to use. Like, for example, putting an asterisk in the word, or to have a dash, 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 or to refer to the word by its first letter, like the F word. No. When we discuss words in this class, you're going to have to write them out. Most of the time, you won't have to say them. There might be a few assignments here and there where I'm going to ask you to say some words, but most of the time it's going to be writing. And I am going to expect you to write them out because we cannot afford to be coy when our object of study is these bad words, these taboo words. We've got to be prepared to address them, to talk about them, to state them clearly if we're going to objectively study them. This is also a good time for me to state something, that if you know about yourself that you are so profoundly offended by certain words that you cannot imagine being able to pay attention, to focus, if you encounter those words, then you may want to consider dropping the class. Now, I don't mean that you won't be offended. I expect and I hope that everybody will be offended at some point during this class. I know that some of the video, some of the material that we are going to address in the class offends me. And that's okay. But if it's going to be so offending to you that you won't be able to learn, then you should drop the class. On the flip side, if the only reason that you are taking this class is because you want to see a professor saying these words, talking about these words in a classroom environment, this class isn't for you either. If you're only in it for the giggles, drop it, please. Now, that's not to say that we won't have some fun in the class, but we do have to take the matter seriously, the material seriously. It's our object of study. It is what we're studying, and it is fascinating. I want to step back for a moment and think about what's done on a large part of this campus. A lot of the departments on this campus, their primary focus of attention is in trying to understand ourselves, trying to understand what makes humans human. And language is a really good window into that, because language is unique to humans. Other animals, I should say, have their ways of communicating. They can communicate, but not to the degree of sophistication that humans do. That makes us unique, and that makes language interesting. And something that seems to be core to language is that some of it is taboo. Now, it's often seen as being sort of a periphery of the language, but what we know is that when we study languages, when we investigate the many, many 6,000, 7,000 languages in the world, all of them have some taboo language to them, which makes them an inherent part of those languages. And that makes the study of it fascinating, because we can learn so much about what makes us human by studying taboo words. So I want you to be approaching this from an attitude of curiosity, from an attitude of wanting to understand what is going on with taboo words. And if you approach it that way, with that attitude of curiosity, you're going to do really well in this class. Like I said, we're going to learn a lot, and it's going to be fascinating. We're also going to have fun along the way. But I expect you to take this class seriously. I expect you to take the material seriously. And I expect you to approach it with that attitude of wanting to understand it, wanting to understand what language, and taboo language in specific, can tell us about us.